of Jung at Harp. I am Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm here with Kathleen Wiley, and each week-ish, we talk about questions. We come up with questions for each other from our lives as artists and psychotherapists, and we unravel these questions with you in a conversation. So this is not us saying like, this is how it is and what we know. We started off a relationship by having a wonderful conversation, and now we've opened up that conversation onto the internet. So today we're talking about security and structure versus freedom, which Kathleen is going to talk about in terms of Apollonian and Dionysian something or another. And the question is, do you need one or the other, or do you want both when it comes to creative freedom? So I am Deborah Henson-Conant, also known as Deborah Henson-Conant, also known as DHC. I'm a composer, a performer, and I also have an online academy where I teach harp players how to improvise. Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst.
And a little psycho some days.
Right. Who also has an online program about embodiment. What is it called? It's called spiritual embodiment. What is it called?
Yeah, you actually can access the information at Online Sacred Circles, and it's a masterclass on embodiment where we work through practices and processes to really be able to embody, live from our essence instead of all these things we've internalized from the outside world.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kathleen. So when we're here in conversation with you, with each other and with you, we're coming from these parts of our lives. And I think one of the things that we are both doing, both as artists and musicians and creators and psychoanalysts, although I'm not a psychoanalyst, is finding out how to connect ourselves to our self-expression. And we both happen to play the harp. Her harp is in such a, you can't see the strings, but it is a harp.
It is a harp.
Yes, it is. And so we call this Jung at Harp. Today, normally we broadcast live on Facebook, YouTube, and several other channels. This week, my Facebook channel was hacked. So we are not on Facebook. And one of the reasons we love to broadcast live is so that you can also be part of the conversation through the chat. That may or may not work today, but we'll open up the chat. And if you can chat with us, we would love to hear your comments and you're part of the conversation. So when we started, Kathleen, I had asked if you had watched my newest TEDx talk. And the newest TEDx talk is called How to Get Out of Your Inner Cage. And it is all about my journey creating my whole life working on one project, which came to me almost like a dream. And it is now a musical, and it's now out on streaming musicals and Amazon and a bunch of different channels. It's called The Golden Cage. But it came to me almost like a dream. And it came to me out of a question, which was, do I want a life of security or a life of freedom? Now, this TEDx talk is all about how I actually had to live that question in order to finish the play. And yet the play itself, or the musical, which now is a film, actually helped me unlock my own life. So this is really fascinating to me, that this structure of writing a play has helped me unlock my life. And then what I'm teaching people in the academy is how to use structures, the simple structures, to unlock creative freedom. You had a lot to say about that.
Yeah, listening to your TEDx talk, and of course, you and I have been talking about The Golden Cage now ever since it debuted off Broadway last April, right? It's been, or April before last. So we've been talking about this topic, but I continue to come back to it because it is one of those questions for how we live our life and live the truth of who we are everywhere, not just in the creative realm. And this idea of how do we bring order to all of this multiplicity of energy in our psyche? I mean, Jung says that we are a complex of opposites. There's a multiplicity if we want to think of it as selves, I think of it as multiplicity of aspects of self, because ultimately there is an integrative unifying principle. So what occurred to me as I was listening to your TEDx talk is you did live into this experience of the integrative power of your own psyche as you held both the desire for security and the desire for freedom, and that somehow something came together that is giving you enough of both. I mean, I'm imagining by the time you released the golden cage, you felt enough security in it as a valid work of art, and you felt that it had enough self-expression. There was enough freedom in it of how do I want to say it? That there was something that transcended the struggle that emerged.
That's really interesting, because as you're talking about it, this new TEDx talk, which I should have put in the link here, and I'll put it in later. It talks about the four questions the four unanswered questions that every time I would share the show early on, there were these four questions that came up, and I knew that the show was not complete because the questions weren't answered. And it was my journey about how to get those questions answered, who I went to. And one of the questions was, what I went to work with a dramaturg who helps playwrights, unravel the journey of their plays. And the dramaturg said to me, what is the backstory of this one character? Where did that character come from? And I had no idea. It just showed up in my mind, and I like a dream, and I had no idea. And so I said to him, I don't know. And he said, well, you go to your own backstory in order to find his. And that made all the difference. And so why am I thinking that? I'm thinking that there are certain things that we need to go through in our life, and certain things that can structure that. Something about what you were just saying made me think, wait a minute, we all need to go back and see, where did this come from? Why am I acting this way? Why do I seem to need this? Why am I looking for this? And not because that ultimately, the answer to that question literally unlocks the freedom for both of these characters. There are many different things that unlock the freedom for these people. They're not people. They're bird people, flying people. And so I think what we're asking is, what are the things that will unlock? What are the structures? What are the structures that will unlock freedom for you? Are they something you can see? Is it a question? Is it a feeling of security? Is it a push? What is it that will unlock freedom? I think that's what we're asking. And you started talking about Apollonian and Dionysian, and I would love to know what that means.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about it in terms of embodiment. Part of the reason I have a passion for embodiment is people have this idea that they have to get outside of themselves in order to find themselves, but you have to get in yourself. And I believe the same is true for true great works of art. And Jung, in writing about these opposites of energies, he says a lot of things. Jung wrote, his own theory kept evolving. But in referencing some of Nietzsche's work, one of the things that he references is that when we have a dream, that's very Apollonian, because it comes from within one's own nature. It's like from the subjective structure and order that's been set in place to you psychologically, to one's life experience, one's backstory that you just referenced to. Whereas the Dionysian is more of the ecstatic. It opens you up to the objective psyche, larger than the subjective self. It opens you up to the objective field. And, when people think about the muse, and I know you're harnessing the muse program, to me, one of the ways I hear that is looking for what is the connection between the subjective personal self one experiences and oneself as, and this larger objective psyche and reality, the creative pool, source of all life, out of which all form emerges. And so we need both, that if we're going to, and I think of another, and this is how we Jungians work. We amplify by connecting things that have a similar feeling tone, even though we could also argue are very different. So I just want to acknowledge that. But Jung says there are two ways that we can relate to the unconscious. Unconscious meaning that which is unknown in our nature. We can make meaning of what we're experiencing, or we can creatively formulate an expression of it. We could look at your writing this musical at 18 or 19. As you were experiencing something you did not know how to make meaning of, an Apollonian, more logical, structured approach. But you did have the chutzpah to put it into a creative formulation. But throughout your 20s, 30s, whatever, you knew it wasn't quite finished. There was something missing. And that when this, the person who came up to you and said, "Are you happy?" And you said, "No, I'm not. I'm really a musical theater composer." And then your friend Sandra handed you a check and said, "Finish it." That it freed you up somehow to take the space to go back and forth between those two opposites to where it emerged. The two came together. And so structure or freedom, Apollonian or Dionysian, we need both. And sometimes our meaning leads us forward, and sometimes a creative expression of something we have no idea what it means leads us forth.
Right. Okay. So it's really interesting. So I'm loving this, because right now in Hip Harp Academy, the quarter that we're in is literally called Structure is Freedom. And my intention is to create enough structure that it gives freedom. And so when and that started off with the Harp improv challenge, where I was teaching what a progression is and how to play with it. And then now it's a larger structure that we're dealing with in the academy. But when people get it, they almost always say the same thing, which is, wow, it's simple, it's easy, I can be expressive, I don't have to think about what I'm doing. Right. Now you'd think that I don't have to think about it is not like, oh, don't you want to think? What I think is actually happening is all the thinking has now come into their body, and they know the structure, the simple structure to use that then supports actual expression, rather than thinking about, am I doing it right? What am I supposed to do? But you're actually able to find the thing that leads to to self-expression at whatever level you're at. And I know that may sound crazy, but my lifelong search is for the fundamental elemental structure that allows creative expression in the moment right now.
Right.
Just because I love that. But I noticed that there are all kinds of structures all over the world. Some of them make you like, oh my God, is it right? Is this wrong? And some of them immediately allow you to flow. For example, here's one, and I've been working on it my whole life. It immediately gave me freedom, but it also gave me a lifelong challenge to be looking for. My physical ed teacher, when I was in junior college, said, every physical thing that you do has two parts to it, the effort and the glide. And if you are not doing the glide, if you do not connect to the glide, you are not doing a complete action. And so I'm constantly looking for, where is that glide? Now that's a lifelong inquiry, and it's also a little bit of structure. Right. Another thing that when I learned, kind of how the scale works and the relationships of it, when I learned, okay, so for example, once I learned that there was a dominant chord for every, and I don't know if you'll hear this, but like if I'm in the key of E flat, then there's this dominant, and you'll hear it all over the place. there's this one chord that always wants to come back. And you'll hear it, especially like at the end of Beethoven. You'll always hear this bum, 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 bum. That's the dominant chord. Once you know there's a dominant chord, in other words, there's a chord that will lead to a sense of home, you can start playing with that chord. You can do things with it like bliss with it. You can play with it in different key. I'm going to go to it in a different key. You can do things like, okay, so here's the dominant of C. Am I doing that right? Okay. You can actually make it even more. So now I can make it more dissonant, which makes it want to go there even more. So I'm altering it, and then so once you know that exists, you have this simple thing to play with, but then you have this lifelong adventure of like, I can do different things with that dominant chord. I can make it bigger. I can alter it. I can substitute it. But I can always go back to this. I can always go back to that. They all have the same function.
Right.
And that is huge to me. Something that has the same function, it has it's just as effective simply, but you can expand it and then come back.
You know, as you were doing that, what occurred to me is that, again, and embodiment is so important because the freedom that we really want has to come back home to the structure and security of our own body mind. But if we never move beyond our own body mind, what's comfortable and familiar, to that dominant that's away from what's comfortable and familiar and feels like us, then we never expand and grow. So that this security and freedom go together. The security of the one chord, the home base, and the freedom of the dominant that's out there. That somehow it begs, but it's got to come back. And this to me is, you know, altered states are great. They're like the 5 chord. We're out exploring. And sometimes we get into the 6th, that's the minor, or the 7th, that's a little bit dissonant. But it all needs to come home. And so it isn't about security or freedom. It's both. That the freedom is in service of the expanded sense of self, right, which is the secure home base. But the secure home base needs the freedom of the Dionysian, who knows what's going to happen next kind of experience. But the knowing what's going to happen next stays rooted in one's own personal self. And the music composition, it stays rooted to the one. It stays rooted to home base.
Wow. This is so fascinating. I really love this. And it's reminding me that one of the things we realized in the last quarter was that a lot of my pieces that are best known all play around with this one dominant, that's in the key, that's in a minor key. It's this kind of like you know, like this dominant, it's just like you can stand there, you can adventure with it, you can go everywhere, anywhere, and then this structure. But you know, you will always hear pieces coming back to that ending. And so as a self-expression, or as a creativity coach, what I'm teaching others is what I've learned about how to create those structures in which you can go adventuring,
right,
and yet there's a home free. And I remember thinking about that when I first started improvising on the harp, because before the harp, I wouldn't say I was an improviser, I was a composer. I would sit down at the piano and I would use improvisation to compose, but and then I would improvise, I would play for my family. I was people have to sing and someone has to keep them together. And that's what my grandmother said. And that's why you play the piano. So that's what I would do. But as I started teaching, which is an amazing opportunity because that's when you get to start breaking it down, I started looking for where are those structures that support freedom.
Yes. Yeah. And again, if we come back to the individual person, the structures that support our freedom to be ourselves is knowing what's going on in our body mind. What are our body sensations telling us? What meaning or feeling is coming up for us around what we value, whether it's pleasurable or unpleasurable to us? What do we make of it? What does our own thinking say? And what does our intuition say? That part of us that just kind of has this knowing from the unconscious realm. So we need these structures, these ways of experiencing ourselves and the world. And the more conscious connection we have to it, then the more secure we're going to feel to grow, explore, to get outside of our comfort zone. So the structures you teach in the academy, we might could play around with and say are like the psychological functions, they're modes of adaptation. How do you these are modes of adaptation.
Wow.
And one of the things you often say in the challenges is by the end of the 5 days, you're going to have these snippets you can put together in a whole. So here we've got like the psychological functions, the modes of adaptation, these little snippets that at the end somehow come together to create, as they say in math, the sum that's greater than the total of the parts. That's the music.
Right.
That's the self.
And you just made me realize something. Most of the people, so somebody in the academy the other day just put a bunch of snippets together. She just sat down, put a bunch of snippets together, and then she presented it as a project. And she said, "Is this music? Because all I did was just put a bunch of these together." And I think, and it was music because it was musical and it made sense and she was expressive through it. And I think so many of us come to music thinking, here's the music, it's on this page, now play it. And so there's an outward thing we think we're fitting into, and that's music, and therefore are we playing it or are we not? And yet in this case, she was the music. Because she had a thing to play with. And then she put it together in different ways, and then she made different choices, and maybe technically she did it the way that worked for her. And that was another thing that in the office hours last night, somebody was talking about how to play a piece, and I said, well, and it was a piece of mine, and she said, this feels awkward, this part. And I said, well, wait a second, that part of the music is all about connecting to whatever your superpower is. So what is your superpower, and how can you put that into this piece at this moment? Is your superpower playing arpeggios? Is your superpower singing? Is your superpower dancing? Like, it doesn't matter. This is the moment where that's what that is all about. And I know that may sound weird to people who are but to me, music is a structure for self-expression. As the minute playing music inhibits, then you go outside, you tell a story, you do whatever it is. The music, the structure supports whatever it is. For example, if I want to say that I love you, and I feel like I got to do it. Well, how am I going to say I love you just with am I going to find out what does I relate to in the alphabet, and I'm going to write it? Or do I just play I love you? The music is there and I love you. Or do I let myself sing I love you? Or do I add rhythm if that's what I feel that I love you? What is it? Or do I need to dance? But it's still within, the music is still providing the structure for that. And
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about that. You're talking about really the musical score being like a script, but it's okay to have enough freedom within the musical score script to bring your own experience of it into it, right?
yeah, I mean, it's just like,
Yeah,
let's go into a different dimension. The music is
yeah,
just providing, it's providing a space in which you're leaving normal reality, or you're pulling normal reality, or something. It's just like something that used to fascinate me as a child was thinking about, and I have to keep, look, I
yeah.
have two pairs of glasses. Ha ha. Okay, I can really see now. Oh, I just realized we're almost have to end.
Ah,
I was fascinated with the idea of how could a shape appear in space in which you don't see the shape, but it's there. And I just realized as we're speaking now, I was thinking of, that's what music is. A shape appears, and into that you express however you can express. And I was writing down as you were talking, share, in order to share yourself, who you are artistically. That's what an instrument is for. That's what art is for. That's what, painting is for. It allows us to share it in a nonverbal way that others can get from it. And the struggle is how much structure at any point opens up the freedom of self-expression, and how much shuts it down.
yeah, and we could again equate structure psychologically to our learned patterns, the feedback loops, the habits, the thought patterns that we've internalized because we've been handed the script, like the
Nice.
musical score.
Great.
This is how you be a person. This is how you respond to this emotion. Whereas part of what music does when you get away from the musical score is it is a bridge into a whole new world. It bridges the objective psyche, the larger reality beyond ourselves, with the personal subjective self. And that in that bridging, we are able to embody, to become more of who we really are. We are
Right.
then able artistically to give expression to and create works of music or art or spoken word that um, are more powerful because we tap into the larger objective strand of energy that represents, but we bring our own felt sense and experience to it. And
Right.
that's what we resonate with.
Right. And you're making me realize that the structures I'm always looking for are those that are simple enough and yet strong enough that you can be who you are in this moment with, and it will actually allow and enhance the expression of that,
Right,
versus let's fit. Oh, wow.
right,
Whew, I feel like this is the beginning of such a big conversation, because I feel like I know that in order to, all the things that we were given, all the scripts that we were given to, like, remember the words, um, giving that up is kind of the first step
right, right, right.
to actually finding what is that simple, simple thread, and yet the strongest thread ever.
Right. And for me in my work as a psychoanalyst and with the embodiment circle, I believe how we begin to have enough security that we can risk giving that up is we start to experience the solidity and the foundation of our own body mind. Again, knowing what's happening in our body, knowing our own thought patterns and what comes from within us and what we've internalized from outside. And these are all psychic muscles, I believe, that we can build and have to build in order to really fully live into ourselves. So that's what the embodiment circle supports.
And as you were saying that, I was realizing those are the structures that I'm teaching It
Hmm.
is like the 5-part arrangement form. It's just a thing that allows you to actually experience yourself.
Right. Right. That's right. That's right. So you're working within the context of music
Right,
as the territory, the energetic system, and giving structures, meaning that then will help people feel secure enough to bring their own felt sense and expression, the creative formulation. And that allows something to happen
right, right.
in
They
the
can
context.
discover, people
Right,
discover themselves
right,
within that context, and then they are able to more self-express.
right.
Ah, it's time to stop. Kathleen, thank you. I love this conversation. I want to come back to this one and wherever it goes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it
It's
was
just
great.
always a pleasure. And thank you for everyone who was here and to everyone who we couldn't reach out to because of me being hacked. I hope we'll be back next week with you. And thank you, Kathleen. And I'll look forward to seeing everybody, you included, next week.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.